Hey guys, welcome back again to Ferrigno Freedom Channel. I'm Dante Ferrigno, and for those of you who are new here, I have been doing a carnivore diet now for 3.5 years. It was inspired by Dr. Jordan Peterson when he was helping me with a lot of things I was dealing with psychologically back in 2020 that were, we were all going through a lot back in 2020, and some of us are still going through a lot even to this day as a result of the things going on in the world. So I find it very helpful sometimes to review some of the information that I learned from him and to watch new information as well. In this case, we're going to check out something I haven't seen. At least I don't think I've seen it. I've watched a lot of his long form videos, and he's been doing a lot of his old stuff in clips here. I think this is an older clip that he has here called "What If You Tried to Live Well?" I haven't seen this particular clip, so I don't know what to expect just at the moment, but I thought I would come share it with you because part of the journey that I've found on a carnivore way of eating is that it's not only been good for me physically, but it's also been good for me mentally and spiritually. So I like to share these things when I'm going through this with my audience because I know a lot of you are going through some of the same things I'm going through as we look around in this crazy world and see all the things that are happening and how it's affecting our lives, it's affecting our mental attitude. And the one thing I want to be able to do is to help people get better, not only physically, but mentally and spiritually. And sometimes addressing some of these issues that are psychological in nature can be quite helpful. And Dr. Jordan Peterson has been very good for me in that regard, and I think that maybe we can learn something here together. I don't know. Let's check it out and find out. Again, What If You Tried to Live Well by Dr. Jordan Peterson.
There's this guy I read about, this is amazing, and I don't remember his name, but he found out about this worm that was called the guinea worm. And guinea worm is a really horrible thing, and you can look it up if you want, but I'll tell you a little bit about it, even though it's very distasteful. So a guinea worm is a parasite that lives in Africa, and it burrows under your skin, and it's quite long. It's about that long, and it's about that wide, and so it'll burrow underneath your leg, and then it's in there, and maybe it pokes its little head out a hole, which is one of its delightful tendencies. And then if you want to pull it out, it breaks, right? Because otherwise you'd just pull it out and it would be dead, and so it doesn't like that, so it just breaks off. And many people had this horrible disease, and well, you can't imagine what that would be like because you're part of the 1% and you live in North America, and thank God for that. But just a little you don't even want to think about it, let alone have it. And he went to Africa and wiped the damn thing out. It's like, whoa, great, it seems to me the planet's a lot better off without any guinea worms on it. Even though that's like guinea worm genocide talk, I'm still pretty happy about it. And so that was one guy who thought, well, we don't need these things, and yeah, well, fair enough, and yeah, well, so good for him. He can die thinking that the world's a better place than it was when he first popped out, and so good for that. I think that's a good aim, I think, is to think that when you're on your deathbed and you can look back and think, well, there's a little less suffering in the world from here on out than there would be if I had never existed. And that's a lot better than the opposite, because it's certainly possible, say, if you're Stalin, to ensure that there's a hell of a lot more suffering in the world than there would have been if you hadn't lived. And we perfectly well know that people can manage that, and that many people try to do nothing but manage precisely that. And it's hard for me not to think about that as some sort of metaphysical evil, and I think it's the right way to look at it. And there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. So you have the sun here, and then the moon here, as far as I can tell. Yeah.
This is clearly from his Genesis series, and I did watch all of that. It's very long, though, and I don't remember him talking about that worm at all, so who knows if I was distracted during that moment, because a lot of times I'm moving around the house when I'm listening to something he's talking about in long form like this, so it's very interesting to hear about that one thing. And just to comment my little 2 cents on that little bit is, yes, I do live in North America. I live in the United States, and as far as the rest of the world goes, that does mean that I'm probably a lot better off than a lot of places. I have visited a few countries in my travels. I've been to Mexico, I've been to France, I've been to Italy, I've been to China, and I've been to the Philippines. And my experiences, especially in Mexico and the Philippines, were somewhat shocking to my senses. is like to the way that they live as opposed to what I'm used to living. I remember being in Mexico the very first time, and I was still probably 19 years old, and it was right at the border area. And noticing the way that they live is so much different, especially in a border city like Matamoros, where I was at. It was kind of it was a little stressful for what I was used to. And I remember feeling that way when I got off the plane in the Philippines. When we left the airport, it was like, wow, we just left this world that I'm used to, and I am in a whole different world. It was just very different than the experience I had here in the United States. And it made me appreciate things. It made me appreciate things that I had here in my country. But I got to admit, being in the Philippines was very welcoming. The people, especially in the Philippines, were so welcoming to Americans over there that, and my heart really went out to them with the difficulties that they faced. It's just different. It affects you when you're used to having so much and you're with people who are used to having so little. Yeah, that's amazing that guy was able to go and do that. But let's finish the last 4 minutes of this video.
Yeah, actually, I think this is the moon over here, but so, yeah, and that's part of the Sistine Chapel, which is, an absolutely remarkable. And part of the reason too, and part of the reason I'm teaching about these biblical stories is because, I'm thinking because the humanities have been decimated so badly, and again, I think that has mostly to do with resentment and hatred more than anything else. But I don't really think that you can get a grip on the humanities and what they have to offer without knowing the biblical stories, because they're the dream out of which the humanities emerge. And so unless you have that background knowledge, that dream, then there's all sorts of things that are utterly profound that don't open themselves up to you. And Dante's Inferno would be one of those, and Milton's Paradise Lost, which is an absolutely amazing piece of work. I mean, Milton wrote it because he wanted to justify the ways of God to man. What an ambition that is. And I mean, he was serious about that. He took the problem seriously. It's like, it's the Mephistophelian problem, is that, well, this is a rough business that we're involved in, and, maybe we should just give it up. And I think the whole world, I think, was deciding that in the 1980s when we were deciding whether we were going to engage in the ultimate nuclear catastrophe, and we were very, very close to that a number of times. And I think it was a collective decision in some sense on the part of humanity that we might as well keep the whole awful game going rather than just demolish it. But Milton, he wrote Paradise Lost it's a dream, again, it's a dream, and trying to explain the nature of being and the nature of evil, and you can't crack the damn thing without knowing the underlying stories, and that's really too bad because it's utterly profound. And the reason you need profound things, as far as I can tell, you need profound knowledge, is because life is actually a profound problem for everyone. I mean, you can shelter back and live a very conservative existence, and look, like, more power to you. I understand why you would do that, but it doesn't stop you from having to face the ultimate questions of life. Right? They're right there in everyone's face, and at least at some point in your life. And it would be better if you could, I think, if you could confront them full on and to deal with them properly and to be a beacon of strength as a consequence of that. And I think that wisdom, that's what the humanities are supposed to teach, is wisdom. And wisdom is what enables you to deal honorably with the tragedy of life. And I think I can't see how you could think that was a bad idea, because there are going to be times when you're in an emergency room and prone to panic and to cry and to break down and to collapse and to be of no use to anyone around you. And that's not the right way to be. It's the right way to be in a situation like that is to be strong and reliable. And I don't think you can do that without being wise. And you can't be wise without putting yourself together and without knowing something about where you came from and what you're like. And that's history and the humanities. And so this isn't optional. It's more necessary. Man does not live by bread alone, and that's exactly the issue here. So you see these magnificent works, I mean, it's not like Michelangelo thought of this literally, he was a genius, for God's sake, and he's trying to get at something, and he's trying to get at the profundity of human culture. I suppose that's why you have this patriarchal figure here, and the cosmic role that consciousness and tradition plays in being itself. And it's ennobling. And you think, people, religious or not, hundreds of millions of people come from all over the world to Rome and go through this little tiny chapel to look at this. There's something in it that everyone needs to see. It's not just beauty, it's more than beauty. It's that which feeds the soul. And everyone feels that, even if they can't explain it.
Yeah, I can agree with that, specifically with the Sistine Chapel, because I have been there. I went to the Vatican when I was in Italy, and I was visiting Rome for about a week. And yeah, it was something. They were doing a cleaning on the Sistine Chapel. They were using some new plan they had to clean the smoke stained cover, because they would burn an incense in there or something all the time, and then it had covered all the painting with this dark sooty looking stuff, and they'd found a way to clean it off that wasn't removing the paint, so it was starting to look really amazing. And there was something to just being in the place that I'd heard about all my life, and I'd heard about Michelangelo and I'd seen the painting before, but seeing it up close was a unique experience too. So all of these travels have been good, like he talks about, for the humanities, the things that you study and you get to see, you get to experience other cultures. It can be wonderful. But I've talked about this as far as in my own personal life. The way of eating that I found gave me such confidence, because I was starting to lose weight. I was starting to have my body not reacting to all the chemicals that were in the ultra-processed garbage that's in the regular food that we eat all the time. And the more I research this stuff, and I research a lot, I've been reading several books on the topic where it goes into the history of what happened with our food, why our food system is basically full of garbage instead of something that's good for us to eat, and why a carnivore way of eating has made such a difference for me. I'm currently reading Sugar, Fat, and Salt, How the Big Corporations Got Us Hooked. I think his name is Michael Moss. That's the author of the book. If I'm wrong, I'll put a picture of it up right here. And I don't necessarily recommend that you need to read this particular book, because one of the things I have found is reading all this stuff actually it makes me angry, and it makes me wonder why somebody didn't step up and say, no, this is the wrong thing to do. You shouldn't be doing these things to the food that you're selling to the public, and you shouldn't be lying to people the way you are about what these foods do and what they are. And the people who are in the nutrition positions shouldn't have been lying about it. And I don't think this guy goes into enough detail on the whole Ansel Keys aspect of it, but I'm only halfway through the book, so I can't say that for sure. But I can tell you, when you research these things and you get the knowledge that helps you to understand why we are where we are, sometimes even that can be a little bit depressing. But what I do know is that when I'm eating right, when I'm keeping this poison out of my body, it helped me to get up and start doing the things that I needed to do, like taking those walks every morning that I always talked about wanting to do, but never actually did when I was eating the way I used to, and I was fighting with my body the way it was. It made such a huge difference to change my diet that led me to change my activity, to start doing the things that he's talking about here, that involve changing your viewpoint on the world, just living well, trying to live well, as opposed to just trying to get through each day, trying to focus on the things that you need to do, eating the right way, taking care of your body as if you were taking care of somebody else you cared for, taking care of yourself that way. I know he mentions that in several of his videos. And by the way, I would certainly recommend checking out his Genesis series, whether you're a Christian or not, because he doesn't come at it from a doctrinal viewpoint. He's coming at it from a psychological standpoint. And I found it very interesting, even though I've gone through Genesis from a doctrinal standpoint many times. Having the psychological standpoint was very eye-opening in a lot of areas, like he talks about right here. So I would certainly recommend it to anybody else who hasn't seen it. And I guess that's all I've got to say about this one, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about this particular topic and video, and how if maybe a carnivore way of eating has helped you on your attempting to live well as opposed to the way you lived before. I would love to hear your thoughts on these things, and I think if you share them, you'll find there's a lot of people out there who are glad to read somebody else is in the same position they are in or they were in, and it'll be encouraging to all of us, just like I hope this video is encouraging to you. Well, that's all I got for this one, guys. I'll see you next time.
If we pay extra, could we maybe get some grease or fat?
Getting back to nature. Something Katie and I like to do when we get a chance is to go out camping or just to go out into the wild. And we also like to prepare for the worst. And the ITEAL portable water filtration system allows us to be able to do both. With its double activated carbon and reverse osmosis membranes, it can remove bacteria, viruses, parasites, heavy metals, pesticides, polyvinyl chloride, PFAs, and it can purify a maximum of 9 gallons of water at a time. Pair this device with ITEAL's 100-watt portable solar panel and a few extra filters, and you could stay in the wild almost indefinitely. Katie and I are very comforted by the idea that we can have clean water anytime thanks to the ITEAL water purification system. And if you use my link in the description with my coupon code, you'll save $40 off this must-have device. I love it, Katie loves it, and I know you'll love it too.